Under the blood moon's merciless gaze, a single drop of crimson froze eternal on the snow. Ilara's breath came in ragged gasps, the wind clawing at her tattered cloak like the fangs of forgotten kin. The mountains of Eldrath rose around her, jagged sentinels cloaked in perpetual winter, their peaks piercing the veil between worlds. She had been cast out, not by decree of king or council, but by the silence of her own bloodline's demise. The vampire clan of Nocturne, ancient guardians of the shadowed vales, had fallen in a single night of fire and fang. Their crypts, once echoing with the low chants of the eternal, now lay ashen ruins, scattered like brittle leaves across the frozen earth. She stumbled forward, her bare feet numb against the icy crust, each step a betrayal of the warmth that once coursed through her veins. The cold was not merely weather, it was punishment, a divine retribution for surviving when her sisters and brothers had not. Ilara's hand clutched the blood-red ruby pendant at her throat, its facets catching the faint lunar light like captured heartbeats. It was the last relic of her mother, the High Matriarch, who had pressed it into her palm with dying breath amid the slaughter. "Avenge us," she had whispered, her voice a rattle of fading echoes. The stone pulsed faintly against Ilara's skin, warm as forbidden life, a symbol of the clan's undying thirst for justice, and her own burgeoning curse. The wind howled through the pines, carrying distant weavos that twisted her gut. Werewolf calls, primal and triumphant, mocking the silence of her lost ones. The Alpha King, Thorn Blackthorn, had led the raid. His pack, those hulking shadows of fur and fury, had descended upon Nocturne under the guise of territorial right. But Ilara knew the truth. It was conquest, pure and ruthless, to claim the lunar temples that bordered their realms. Her clan, with their ethereal grace and blood-bound magic, had long been thorns in the werewolf empire's side, whispered rivals in the dance of night and moon. Thorn, the unyielding sovereign of the Silverfang realm, bore the scars of old wars, they said, but his heart was iron, forged in the fires of unchecked dominion. Ilara collapsed against a boulder, the stone's chill seeping into her bones like grave soil. Her vision blurred, not from exhaustion alone, but from the venom of rejection that poisoned her from within. She was no warrior queen, no fabled seductress of legends. She was the clan's forgotten daughter, trained in the arts of shadow and subtlety, not the blade. Yet survival demanded reinvention. In the hidden scrolls of Nocturne, tales spoke of the Alpha's weakness, a loneliness carved deeper than any claw mark, a guilt that haunted his solitary hunts. If she could infiltrate his court, weave herself into the fabric of his guarded world, perhaps she could strike where armor failed. Into the heart of the beast, the snow swirled around her, painting her raven hair with flecks of white, as if the gods themselves sought to bury her alive. She remembered the night of the fall, the clash of steel and snarls, the acrid scent of burning tapestries, the warm spray of blood on her face as she fled the crypts. Her lover, Darius, had stood at the vanguard, his eyes gleaming with vampiric fire, only to be torn asunder by Thorn's own paw. "For the balance," the Alpha had roared, his voice thunder over the fray. Balance? It was annihilation, the erasure of an entire lineage to sate his pack's hunger for supremacy. Tears froze on Ilara's lashes, crystalline prisons for her rage. The ruby pendant seemed to throb in rhythm with her pulse, a reminder that her blood was not yet spilled. She was Omega in the old tongues, not of the werewolf hierarchy, but of her clan's shadowed lore, the quiet one, the vessel of hidden potential, born to endure what Alphas shattered. Rejection had stripped her of home, of purpose beyond vengeance, but it had also awakened something feral within. The cold sharpened her senses. She could taste the metallic tang of impending storm on the air, hear the subtle shift of prey in the underbrush. Rising unsteadily, Alara pressed on toward the Silverfang borders, the wind whipping her cloak like a banner of defiance. The path wound through a ravine where ancient runes glowed faintly under the snow, marks of the Deusa Lunar, the goddess who bridged vampire mist and werewolf howl. Ilara whispered a prayer to her, lips chapped and bleeding. "Let me be the shadow that claims the light." The ruby warmed further, as if in answer, its crimson depths swirling like trapped storms. Hours blurred into a haze of frostbite and determination. The forest thickened, branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. Weavos echoed closer now, a chorus of warning or invitation. She could not tell. Exhaustion clawed at her, but so did the fire of purpose. To avenge her clan, she would become what they never expected. A siren in the snow, seducing the king who had orphaned her. Yet doubt gnawed, a whisper amid the gale. What if his guilt was a mask, his wounds a lure? What if redemption came not from her blade, but from the very union she plotted to destroy? As dusk bled into night, the blood moon climbed higher, casting the world in hues of scarlet and silver. Alara crested a ridge, the valley below unfolding like a map of fate. The faint glow of Silverfang torches flickering against the dark. Her heart pounded, a drum of blood and resolve. The pendant hung heavy, a chain linking her past to the peril ahead. In that moment, amid the swirling snow and the moon's unblinking eye, Alara felt the first stirrings of transformation, not into monster, but into something unbreakable. The exile was her forge, vengeance her crown. But the gods, in their cruel poetry, had other designs woven in the threads of destiny. The snow-laden pines whispered secrets as Alara descended into the valley, her footsteps muffled by the relentless drift that blanketed the earth like a shroud. The torches of Silverfang flickered in the distance, orange flames dancing against the encroaching night. But they offered no warmth, only the illusion of sanctuary for one who carried death in her veins. The ruby pendant at her throat pulsed with a heat that defied the frost, its crimson glow a silent sentinel against the encroaching dark. It was her anchor, the last tether to Nocturne's shadowed legacy, now a weapon forged in grief. She moved like a specter through the underbrush, her vampiric senses sharpening in the cold's embrace. The air tasted of pine resin and distant smoke, laced with the metallic undercurrent of blood, fresh, spilled, not yet frozen. Her heart, that reluctant organ in her chest, quickened, not from fear alone, but from the primal pull of the hunt, the very instinct her clan had honed through centuries of nocturnal prowls. Vengeance called to her like a lover's sigh, promising release in the Alpha's downfall. Yet as she drew nearer, skirting the perimeter of patrolled woods, a low growl rumbled through the trees, vibrating the ground beneath her feet. Ilara froze, her breath catching in a plume of vapor. The sound was not the triumphant chorus of a pack, but solitary, ragged, a beast in torment. Curiosity warred with caution. She should flee, melt into the shadows as her training demanded. But the growl twisted into a pained whine, pulling her forward like an unseen thread. Pushing through a thicket of frost-laced ferns, she emerged into a small clearing ringed by ancient oaks. Their branches bowed under the weight of ice. There, slumped against a gnarled trunk, was a figure that stole the air from her lungs. He was immense, even in repose, his form half man, half wolf, fur matted with blood and snow. Thorn Blackthorn, the Alpha King himself, his broad chest heaving with labored breaths, one massive paw clutched to a gash across his flank. Silver fur streaked with crimson gleamed under the blood moon's light, and his eyes, golden, feral, rimmed with exhaustion, snapped open as she approached. The air thickened with his scent, musk and iron, dominance laced with something unexpectedly vulnerable, like storm clouds heavy with unshed rain. Instinct surged through Alara, a jolt that rooted her in place. Her blood sang in recognition. An ancient harmony she had only read of in forbidden tomes, The pull between predator and prey, alpha and omega, twisted now by the veil of species. But she was no simpering wolf. She was vampire, shadowborn, and this beast had raised her world. Fear coiled in her gut, sharp as a dagger's edge, yet curiosity bloomed alongside it, unbidden. Why was he here, alone and wounded, far from his fortress's iron gates? The legend spoke of his invincibility, yet here he bled like any mortal fool. "Stay back, Shadow Witch!" he snarled, his voice a gravelly thunder that echoed off the trees. He tried to rise, muscles rippling under his pelt, but winced, fresh blood seeping between his claws. The wound was deep, jagged, not from claw or fang, but something colder. Poisoned steel, perhaps, wielded by a traitor's hand. His golden eyes bored into her, assessing, wary. "What foul magic drags you to these borders? Speak, or I'll end you before the moon sets." Ilara's hand instinctively rose to the ruby pendant, its warmth a shield against his gaze. She should run or strike, let the shadows claim him while he faltered. But the connection hummed between them, instinctive and unwelcome, like the first spark of dawn piercing eternal night. It was in the way his nostrils flared at her scent, wild rose and old blood, and how her pulse echoed his ragged breaths. Denied, she told herself. This was no bond, only the trick of survival's desperation. Fear made her bold, curiosity a veil for her plot. If she was to seduce the king, to weave vengeance into his bedchamber, this encounter was fate's cruel gift, a glimpse of the fracture she would exploit. "I am no witch," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs, laced with the silken cadence of Nocturne's daughters. She stepped closer, the snow crunching softly under her feet, her cloak falling open to reveal the pale curve of her throat, marked only by the ruby's glow. "Merely a wanderer, lost in the storm, and you bleed as if the gods themselves have turned against you, King Thorn." His ears twitched at his name, surprise flickering in those golden depths before hardening into suspicion. He shifted, forcing himself upright against the tree, towering even on one knee. The air grew heavy with the scent of his pain, mingling with the crisp bite of winter wind. "You know me, then, yet you stand unafraid? Bold for one so fragile." His gaze raked over her, lingering on the pendant, its crimson drawing his eye like a fresh wound. A low rumble built in his chest, not quite a growl. Recognition, perhaps, of the relic's power, or something deeper, a pull he too resisted. Ilara's skin prickled under his scrutiny, the cold forgotten in the heat of proximity. She could feel the weight of his guilt, unspoken, radiating like embers from a dying fire. Whispers from the clan's archives painted him not as monster alone, but as a king haunted by the wars he waged, the balances he shattered in duty's name. Was this the loneliness she would prey upon? The thought stirred a moral ache in her chest, vengeance or mercy, the eternal dance. But no, her sister's ashes demanded more. "I fear many things," she said softly, kneeling at a safe distance, her dark eyes meeting his without flinching. The ruby warmed against her skin, as if feeding on the tension. "But not a king brought low by his own shadows. What hunts you in these woods? Or have the Silverfangs turned on their alpha?" Thorn's laugh was bitter, a sound like cracking ice. "Traitors lurk in every pelt, Omega-born or not. But your scent betrays you. Vampire, Nocturne's ghost." He tensed, claws digging into the bark, yet he did not lunge. The connection lingered, denied by both, fear birthing a fragile curiosity, the first thread of an unwanted web. As the wind howled through the clearing, carrying Weavos from afar, Ilara realized the peril of this moment. To flee was to abandon her path, to stay, to risk the very redemption she sought to deny him. The ruby pulsed, a heartbeat shared in the silence, and in that suspended breath the moon watched, weaving destinies from blood and frost. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The wind's howl sharpened into a chorus of distant snarls, pulling Alara from the trance of Thorn's gaze. The ruby pendant burned against her skin, a warning ember in the frost-kissed night, as shadows stirred beyond the clearing's edge. Thorn's nostrils flared, his golden eyes narrowing into slits of primal alert. He rose unsteadily, the gash in his flank weeping fresh crimson that stained the snow like spilled wine from a chalice of fate. Pain etched lines into his lupine features, but his posture straightened, a king's defiance uncoiling despite the betrayal of his body. "They're coming?" he growled, low and resonant, the words vibrating through the air like thunder trapped in a cavern. "My own blood, scent of silver and deceit. You must go, vampire. This is no place for ghosts of the fallen." Alara's pulse thrummed in echo, the ruby's heat mirroring the sudden fire in her veins. Fear twisted with an unwelcome urge to linger, to witness the unraveling of the beast who had shattered her world. But the snarls grew nearer, a pack's relentless cadence cutting through the pines, and survival's cold logic overrode her vengeful heart. She nodded once, sharp and silent, yet as she turned toward the thicket, a massive paw clamped around her wrist, gentle almost, in its iron grip, the warmth of his touch searing through her chilled flesh like forbidden sunlight. "Not that way," Thorn rumbled, his breath hot against her ear as he pulled her closer, their bodies aligning in the snow's unyielding grip. "The ravine leads to their jaws. Follow me if you value your shadows." She should have wrenched free, let the traitors descend and tear him apart, fulfilling half her clan's dirge in one brutal stroke. But the connection pulsed between them, instinctive and insistent, a thread woven from the moon's indifferent weave. Curiosity, that treacherous bloom, held her fast. In his eyes she glimpsed not just the conqueror, but a mirror of her own exile, haunted, bleeding from wounds self-inflicted by duty's blade. With a breath that tasted of pine and peril, Alara allowed him to lead, their forms melting into the underbrush as the first howls shattered the night. They moved as one shadowed entity through the labyrinth of iced boulders and skeletal trees, Thorn's limp forcing a halting rhythm that synced with her own ragged steps. The cold clawed at her cloak, but his presence warded it, a wall of heat and musk that stirred something deep within, revulsion laced with an aching recognition. The ruby swayed between her breasts, its glow dimmed now, as if conserving its fire for the trial ahead. Behind them, the pack's pursuit thundered, paws pounding the earth like war drums, their scents a foul mingle of wet fur and poisoned intent. Thorn's breath came in controlled bursts, each exhale a plume that mingled with hers, forging an invisible bond in the frigid air. A narrow cleft in the mountain face yawned before them, concealed by a curtain of icicles that glittered like the Deuce's frozen tears. Thorn shoved through, his body shielding hers from the jagged edges, and they tumbled into a shallow cave, its walls veined with quartz that caught the blood moon's light in prismatic shards. The entrance narrowed just enough to bar larger forms, and as the snarls crested the ridge outside, he wedged a fallen branch across it, his muscles straining against the wood's frost-slick weight. Alara pressed against the damp stone, her heart a frantic drum echoing the ruby's subtle throb, watching as he collapsed beside her, golden eyes fierce with the storm of battle deferred. The cave was a womb of stone and silence, broken only by the distant clamor of claws scraping rock and frustrated yips fading into the gale. Thorn's chest heaved, blood pooling beneath him in a dark mirror of the pendant's hue, and for the first time, Alara saw the full measure of his fracture, not the alpha's roar, but the man's quiet unraveling. Guilt shadowed his features, a weight heavier than any crown, born of wars waged for a realm that now devoured its own. They were my betas once, he murmured, voice rough as gravel under boot, his gaze fixed on the sealed entrance. Loyal until ambition's fang bared. A rival alpha whispers in their ears, promises of my throne, stained with my blood. But I led them to this. The raid on Nocturne was no whim. It was to secure the borders, to end the endless dance of mist and moon. Yet balance demands a price I never tallied. Ilara's throat tightened, the words a dagger twisting in her gut. Nocturne, her clan's name on his lips, casual as a curse, igniting the embers of rage she had banked for survival. She slid closer despite herself, the cave's chill pressing them together, her hand hovering over his wound before instinct guided it down. The air hummed with their shared warmth, the scent of his blood mingling with her own faint trace of wild rose and ancient earth. Empathy crept in, unbidden, a thief in the night, softening the edges of her hatred. He was no mindless destroyer. He was a king forged in the same fires of loss that scarred her soul, his melancholy a echo of her exile's hollow ache. "You speak of balance," she whispered, her fingers brushing the edge of the gash, drawing a hiss from him that was more surprise than pain. "But my kin lie in ashes for your security. What price do the dead pay?" Thorn's eyes met hers, golden depths swirling with a torment that stripped away the beast's facade. His paw, clawed hand now shifting toward man, covered hers, not in dominance, but in a plea unspoken. The touch ignited a spark, visceral and profound, racing through her like liquid fire, awakening senses long dulled by grief. The ruby flared, its crimson light dancing across their joined hands, as if the stone itself bore witness to the fragile bridge forming. Fear still lingered, a shadow at the cave's mouth, but curiosity had deepened into something perilously close to understanding, a bond born not of choice, but of necessity's cruel mercy. Outside, the wind mourned with renewed fury, carrying the pack's retreating howls into the void. In the cave's dim sanctuary, time stretched, their breaths sinking in the quiet aftermath. Ilara felt the weight of his gaze, probing the walls she had built around her vengeance, and for a heartbeat, doubt flickered. Was this refuge a step toward his undoing, or the first crack in her own armored heart? The moon's light filtered through cracks in the stone, painting their forms in silver and red, and in that suspended intimacy, the Deusa whispered of paths untaken, redemption not as conquest, but as shared survival. Thorn's voice broke the hush, soft as melting snow. "Why aid me, Shadowborn? You could have left me to the wolves." His thumb traced her wrist, a gesture of tentative trust that sent shivers unrelated to the cold racing across her skin. "Because even kings deserve a moment's grace," she replied, the words tasting of half-truth, her free hand clutching the ruby as if to anchor her resolve. Yet as empathy wove tighter, turning fear to fragile alliance, Ilara wondered if the true peril lay not in the enemies without, but in the warmth blooming within. The cave held them close, a temporary haven amid the storm. But the night was young, and destinies, like blood, demanded their due. The cave's quartz veins pulsed with the blood moon's crimson light, casting fractured glows across Thorn's furrowed brow and Ilara's pale features, as if the stone itself breathed in rhythm with their shared unease. The air hung thick with the scent of damp earth and spilled blood, the ruby's warmth now an insistent throb against her chest, syncing with the slow, deliberate cadence of his breaths. Outside, the wind had softened to a mournful sigh, the pack's howls retreating into the night's vast maw, leaving only the echo of peril in the silence. Ilara's hand lingered beneath his, the heat of his touch seeping into her skin like sunlight piercing eternal dusk, stirring a confusion she dared not name. Vengeance had been her lodestar, sharp and unyielding, yet here in this shadowed womb, it blurred at the edges, softened by the raw vulnerability in his golden eyes. Thorn shifted, wincing as the gash in his flank tugged, fresh crimson welling like tears from a wounded sky. "Grace," he echoed her words, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the stone floor. "From one whose world I shattered. You're either a fool or a goddess's jest, vampire." His claws retracted slightly. The shift toward man more pronounced now, revealing the scarred breadth of his chest, marked by old battles, claw rakes from rivals, burns from enchanted flames. But it was the deeper wound, the one etched in his gaze, that drew her in. Guilt, heavy as chains forged in the forges of Nocturne itself. He had spoken of balance, yet his eyes betrayed the lie. The raid had been no mere border skirmish, but a desperate grasp at power to quell unrest in his own ranks, the traitor's seeds sown long before her clan's fall. Elara withdrew her hand, the absence of his warmth leaving a chill that the cave's frost amplified. She rose to her knees, the snow-damp hem of her cloak pooling around her like spilled ink, and leaned toward the wound. The ruby pendant swung forward, its facets catching the moonlight in a hypnotic swirl, crimson depths alive with an inner storm. "Fool or not, your blood calls to something in me," she murmured, her voice laced with the silken timbre of her shadowed heritage. Doubt gnawed at her. Why heal the destroyer? But the stone's pulse quickened, urging her onward, as if Nocturne's ghosts demanded she witness his unraveling first. Her fingers hovered over the gash, trembling not from cold, but from the forbidden pull, the instinctive bond that defied species and slaughter. As her touch brushed the ragged edges, a jolt surged through her, a visceral current, like lightning threading vein and sinew. The ruby flared, its light bursting forth in a radiant bloom that illuminated the cave's recesses, painting walls in hues of blood and silver. Elara gasped, her vision narrowing to the wound, where her blood, cool, eternal, mingled with his hot, feral essence. It was no mere contact, it was awakening. Deep within her, the clan's hidden gift stirred, long dormant in her exile's grief. The Pathfinder's vein, a vampiric legacy of sight and mending, allowing her to trace the threads of fate through blood's sacred map. She had always sensed it faintly, a whisper in her dreams, but rejection had sealed it away, a power too potent for one deemed unworthy by her own kin. Now it unfurled like mist under moonlight. Visions cascaded through her mind. Thorns past, vivid and unrelenting, the raid on Nocturne not as conquest, but as a ritual gone awry, his betas twisting the Alpha's command into massacre to frame him for the rival's gain. She saw the traitor's face, a sleek beta named Garrick, his eyes gleaming with ambition as he poisoned Thorn's blade during the hunt that led here. Deeper still, the revelation pierced. Her blood, mingled with his, ignited a lunar prophecy from the Deusa's temples, one her mother had guarded. Elara was no mere survivor. She was the bridge, the Omega vessel, whose union with an Alpha could heal the rift between mist and moon, binding vampire and werewolf in a destiny that would shatter the traitor's plot, or doom them both. Thorn's breath hitched, his body arching as the wound knit beneath her palm, flesh weaving with ethereal threads of silver light. The pain ebbed from his features, replaced by awe, his golden eyes widening as fragments of her visions bled into his own mind through the bond. "What? What sorcery is this?" he rasped, his hand clamping over hers again, not to stop her, but to anchor the flood. The cave seemed to contract around them, the quartz humming in resonance, the ruby's glow fading to a steady ember as the healing completed. He sat up fully now, strength returning like a tide, but his gaze held no triumph, only the dawning horror of truth. "You see it? The lies, Garrick? He used Nocturne as bait to turn my pack against me, and your blood sings of the old rites, the Deusa's chosen, the one to mend what I broke." Elara recoiled, the visions receding like smoke. leaving her breathless and exposed. The gift's manifestation had stripped her bare, revealing not just his sins, but her role in the weave, a key to his redemption, and perhaps her own undoing. Rage flickered anew, hot against the cave's chill. He had still ordered the raid, still spilled her kin's blood. Yet the bond thrummed, undeniable, pulling her toward him with a force that mirrored the moon's inexorable draw. Thorn reached for her, his touch tentative, fingers tracing the ruby's chain, the stone warm between them like a shared heartbeat. "You're the prophecies' heart," he whispered, voice thick with melancholy. "The shadow that lights the path. I thought balance meant strength through conquest, but this, you are the mercy I never sought." Tears pricked her eyes, freezing on her lashes as the wind outside stirred anew, carrying faint weavos of the returning pack. The revelation hung between them, a dilemma etched in blood and light. To embrace this destiny was to forgive, to weave vengeance into alliance. To deny it was to shatter the fragile refuge they had forged. Ilara's hand covered his. The ruby's pulse a bridge across their chasm, and in that moment, under the moon's watchful eye, she felt the first stirrings of possibility, not just survival, but a renaissance born of shared wounds. The cave's silence deepened, broken only by their synchronized breaths as the night pressed in, demanding choices forged in fire and frost. "Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth." The blood moon hung low, its crimson veil draping the ravine like a shroud woven from the veins of forgotten gods, as Ilara and Thorn emerged from the cave's quartz embrace into a world sharpened by betrayal's edge. The wind lashed at them, carrying the acrid tang of torch smoke and the guttural snarls of the approaching pack, a symphony of fractured loyalty that clawed at Ilara's resolve. Her hand instinctively pressed to her abdomen, where a secret stirred. A life kindled in the fevered hours after the revelation, when vulnerability had shattered into union, their bodies entwining in the cave's dim sanctuary as if the Dusa herself had decreed it. The ruby pendant throbbed against her skin, its warmth now a dual pulse, echoing not just her heart, but the fragile rhythm within. Pregnancy, a curse and a crown, born of seduction's ploy, turned perilously real. She had meant to ensnare him, to whisper vengeance through stolen nights, but the bond had twisted fate, leaving her vessel claimed by the very heir she plotted to destroy. Thorn moved ahead, his form fully shifted to the colossal wolf of silver fur and shadowed muscle, the healed gash now a faint scar like a map of their shared awakening. His golden eyes flicked back to her, a silent command laced with the melancholy that had deepened since her gift's unveiling, the weight of truths he could no longer deny. Garrick's treachery loomed largest, the beta's poisoned whispers turning the nocturne raid into a gambit for the throne, framing Thorn as the tyrant to rally the disloyal, and she, Ilara, the Pathfinder's heir, whose blood could seal the prophecies pact between mist and moon, birthing a lineage to end the wars. Yet freedom whispered temptations of its own. Escape into the shadows, abandoning this alpha to his pack's fangs, her child a ghost in the wind. The ravine widened into a frost-cracked plateau where the pack waited like specters under the moon's judgmental glow. Torches sputtered in iron sconces, casting elongated shadows that danced across 24 hulking forms. Wolves and half-shifted betas, their pelts bristling with anticipation, eyes gleaming with the feral hunger of ambition. At their fore stood Garrick, sleek and black-furred, his muzzle scarred from old hunts, flanked by a rival alpha from the eastern fringes. A brute named Vargan, his coat tawny and scarred, eyes burning with the fire of unchallenged claim. The air thickened with their scents, dominance soured by deceit, the metallic bite of drawn silver blades enchanted against the undead. "Thorn Blackthorn," Garrick snarled, his voice a silken venom that slithered through the wind. You return, bloodied and broken, dragging a vampire whore into our midst. The pack has spoken. Your reign ends tonight. The raid on Nocturne was your folly, your thirst for power that spilled our brother's blood in vain. Step down, or we'll carve the throne from your hide. Ilara's breath caught, the cold seeping deeper as memories flooded her, the crypts aflame, her kin screams mingling with the howls that now encircled them. The ruby burned hotter, its crimson light flaring beneath her cloak, illuminating the faint swell she hid. Thorn halted, his massive frame a barrier between her and the encircling wolves, a low growl rumbling from his chest like thunder trapped in stone. Pain etched his stance, not from wounds, but from the guilt that her visions had excavated. He had ordered the borders secured, yes, but Garrick had twisted it into slaughter, using the chaos to sow doubt. Lies from a traitor's maw, Thorn rumbled, his voice resonant, carrying the ethical core of a king, unbroken by crown's weight. You poisoned the hunt, Garrick, turned my command into massacre to paint me the monster. Nocturne fell not for balance, but for your ambition. And Vargan, your whispers promise glory, but deliver chains. The pack shifted uneasily, murmurs rippling like wind through pines, some eyes flickering toward Ilara with suspicion, nostrils flaring at her scent. Vampire mist, laced now with the subtle bloom of new life, Alpha touched. Vargan lunged forward, his form rippling into half-man, claws extended, a massive broadsword glinting with lunar runes. Proof stands before us. The shadow bitch at your side, reeking of your weakness. You've bedded the enemy, Thorn. The Deusa reviles such unions. Your bloodline ends here, sterile and shamed. Ilara's world narrowed to the clash, her hand clutching the ruby as if it could anchor her against the storm. Freedom beckoned. Slip into the shadows, let them tear him apart, avenge her clan with his fall. Her child a secret she could raise in exile's veil. Or forgiveness, a war waged not with fangs, but with the prophecies' light, binding their worlds through the air growing within. The wind howled, whipping snow into veils that stung her eyes, and she felt the life stir, a kick like a heartbeat demanding choice. Love or liberty? The moral chasm yawned, her seduction's web now a noose around her own throat. Thorn met Vargan's charge, their bodies colliding in a visceral storm of fur and fury, claws raking steel, blood spraying across the snow in arcs of deep red that mirrored the moon's hue. Garrick circled, directing the pack's advance, their howls a cacophony that drowned Ilara's pulse. She backed toward a jagged outcrop, the cold stone biting her palms, but the bond pulled her forward. Instinctive, resisted no longer. Her gift surged, the Pathfinder's vein igniting. Visions flashed of the child's potential, a hybrid soul to heal the rifts, but only if she chose mercy over the war her heart craved. As Thorn staggered under Vargan's onslaught, a gash reopening across his shoulder, spilling hot blood that steamed on the frost, Ilara stepped into the fray. Enough! Her voice cut through the din, silken yet commanding, the ruby's light erupting in a radiant pulse that halted the pack mid-lunge. They recoiled, eyes wide as the crimson glow wove silver threads through the air, illuminating the truth. Garrick's hidden scars from the poisoned blade, Vargan's alliance forged in Nocturne's stolen relics. The traitor is revealed, she declared, her free hand splaying over her abdomen, the secret spilling forth in the light's embrace. And with him falls your lies. This child, Thorn's heir, carries the Deuce's will, mist and moon united. Choose now, war that devours all, or redemption through the blood we share. The pack faltered. Garrick's snarl twisting into a yelp as Thorn's paw clamped his throat, golden eyes blazing with the justice of a king reclaimed. Vargan roared, swinging his blade, but Ilara's light ensnared it, freezing the steel in ethereal frost. The wind stilled, the moon bearing witness to the confrontation's pivot. Forgiveness offered like a gauntlet, or war's abyss. Thorn's gaze met hers amid the bloodied snow, a question in the gold. Would she stand with him or flee into the night? Ilara's heart fractured, the ruby's pulse a dirge for choices unmade, as the pack's howls softened to whispers, the night teetering on the edge of rebirth or ruin. In that suspended breath, under the crimson sky, she tasted the bitter poetry of destiny. Strength lay not in vengeance's blade, but in the mercy that might save them all, or doom her to eternal exile. The blood moon's crimson gaze bore down on the plateau, turning the swirling snow into a veil of scarlet confetti, each flake a witness to the unraveling of empires built on lies. Ilara stood at the fray's heart, her body a conduit for the ruby's radiant fury, its crimson light weaving through the air like threads of fate pulled taut. The pack encircled them, a ring of bristling fur and bared fangs, their howls silenced into uneasy breaths that misted the frigid night. Thorn's massive paw pinned Garrick to the frost-cracked earth, the traitor's black pelt matted with his own deceit-spilled blood, golden eyes wide with the shock of exposure. Vargan strained against the ethereal frost encasing his blade, his tawny form rippling with futile rage, muscles corded like ancient roots defying the storm. Ilara's hand splayed over the subtle swell of her abdomen, the child's stir a quiet rebellion against the chaos. A life forged in the cave's shadowed union, where seduction had surrendered to something deeper, more treacherous. The ruby pendant throbbed in rhythm, its warmth seeping into her veins like liquid fire, amplifying the Pathfinder's gift until visions cascaded unbidden, futures branching like lightning across a darkened sky. One path led to war's abyss, her clan's vengeance sated in Thorn's blood, the heir a solitary wanderer in eternal exile. Another whispered of union, mist and moon entwined, birthing a realm where rejection birthed not ruin, but renewal. The wind clawed at her cloak, carrying the metallic tang of blood and the distant weevo of the wild, urging her toward the chasm's edge. Freedom tempted, sharp as a dagger's promise. Flee now, let the pack devour their king, raise the child in Nocturne's hidden veils, untainted by his guilt. Yet the bond hummed between her and Thorn, insistent as the moon's pull on the tides, rationalized no longer. In his golden eyes, locked on hers amid the standoff, she saw not the conqueror who had raised her world, but the man scarred by duty's blade, ethical to his core, melancholic in his isolation, guilt a crown heavier than silver. He had resisted her at first, denying the instinctive draw in the clearing snow, rationalizing it as survival's illusion. She had mirrored him, weaving seduction as armor for her rage, only for the cave's intimacy to crack it wide. Their nights since the revelation had been a fever of resisted touches turning to acceptance, bodies and souls colliding in the prophecies' inexorable dance. The child was proof, not a weapon of revenge, but a bridge, her womb the vessel where Alpha's fire met Vampire's mist. Garrick writhed beneath Thorn's grip, his snarl twisting into a desperate plea. "She's poison, my king! Her kind bewitched you! The raid was justice! Nocturne threatened our borders with their blood rights! End her! Reclaim your throne!" The pack murmured, loyalty fracturing like ice under heat, some betas shifting uneasily, nostrils flaring at the mingled scents of alpha claim and vampiric bloom. Vargan roared, shattering the frost with a surge of raw power, his blade swinging in a deadly arc toward Ilara's throat. Time slowed, the wind's howl a dirge in her ears as Thorn lunged, intercepting the blow with his own body. Claws raked his shoulder, reopening old scars in a spray of crimson that painted the snow, steaming in the cold like offerings to the deusa. Pain lanced through Ilara, visceral as her own, the bond transmitting his agony in waves that buckled her knees. She staggered forward, the ruby's light erupting anew, silver threads lancing from her palm to ensnare Vargan, binding him in luminous chains that burned with lunar fire. "No more lies," she breathed. her voice a silken command echoing across the plateau, the child's kick a fierce affirmation within. The pack recoiled, the revelation's weight settling like fresh snow, her gift laid bare, the heir's potential a beacon in the night. Garrick's eyes darted, ambition crumbling as Thorn's claws tightened, drawing a gurgle of surrender. "Mercy or death," Thorn growled. His voice thunder laced with sorrow, golden gaze never leaving Alara's. "Choose, brothers. War devours the innocent. Compassion forges the unbreakable." The moral precipice yawned beneath her, power versus heart laid raw. Sacrifice Thorn to her clan's ghosts, and freedom would taste of ashes, the child forever shadowed by unanswered blood. Or embrace the union, healing the wounds of raid and rejection through forgiveness's forge, a redemption not earned as reward, but chosen as proof. Tears froze on her lashes, crystalline as the icicles crowning the pines, as the wind softened to a whisper, the blood moon dipping toward the horizon like a weary sentinel. Ilara stepped to Thorn's side, her hand finding his bloodied fur, the ruby's glow enveloping them both in a halo of crimson and silver. "I choose us," she whispered, the words a vow etched in soul-deep resolve, her free hand pressing to her belly. "Not for vengeance's blade, but for the life that mends what was broken. The air will bind our worlds, mist, moon, blood eternal." The pack stilled, Garrick's form slumping in defeat as Thorn released him, the traitor's whimpers swallowed by the night. Vargan strained once more, then bowed, the chains dissolving into motes of light that danced upward like fireflies ascending to the stars. Murmurs turned to affirming growls, loyalty realigning under the prophecy's undeniable call, the Deuce's will manifest in the Omega's quiet strength. Thorn shifted to man, his scarred form towering yet vulnerable, pulling Alara into an embrace that warded the cold, his lips brushing her temple in a kiss, tasting of salt and snow. "You are my redemption," he murmured, voice thick with the melancholy lifted, the shadow that heals the king's wound. As dawn's first pallor bled across the peaks, painting the plateau in hues of rose and frost, Alara felt the Renascimento stir within, a rebirth not of fire and fang, but of union's gentle flame. The ruby pendant cooled to a steady warmth, its crimson depths now a symbol of shared destiny, pulsing with the heir's promise. Rejection had exiled her, guilt had fractured him, but choice had woven them anew, love as the ultimate proof, transcending hierarchies in the moon's eternal gaze. The pack dispersed into the forest, guardians now of the fragile peace, while Thorn led her toward the silver-fanged spires, their steps synced in the snow's hush. In that moment, amid the fading howls and the wind's tender caress, Ilara tasted true freedom, not solitude's veil, but the compassionate power of hearts entwined. The gods had forged them in suffering. Now they would rule in light. If your heart beat alongside ours, comment and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.